Well, today's youth in America growing more troubled. A new study shows a staggering amount of young people getting arrested these days. According to the report, by age 23, 41% of adolescents have been arrested at least once for something other than a minor traffic violation. Well, the study doesn't give details on the crime, so it's unclear what exactly they're being arrested for. But it looked at 7,000 young people between the years of 1997 and 2008. So what's happening to today's youth and what's behind the skyrocketing number of them getting arrested? To share some insight on this, I spoke to researcher and policy analyst at the Justice Policy Institute, Amanda Pederuti. And since the study didn't provide many specifics, I asked her what exactly are these young people being arrested for? Take a look.
Well, it's hard to say. But we do know, for example, that there's been an increase in the number of police in schools, for example, and there are a lot of young people in schools. So, for example, between 1997 and 2007, there's been about a 38% increase in police in schools. And we know that in some districts, students have been arrested for very minor offenses, things like disorderly conduct. So that could be contributing to the number of students or the reason that there's been so many young people arrested over the course of the study.
And would you say that most of these crimes are violent or non-violent, and how many of them are drug-related?
It's hard to say how many are drug-related. It is possible that very low-level drug offenses are driving some of the arrests, but from schools in particular, it'll be very, very minor things. It could be anything as minor as swearing at a teacher, for example, or just generally disrupting class.
But you can get arrested for swearing at a teacher.
Yes, you can. Absolutely. A school resource officer may be called to a classroom, and you could be arrested for disrupting class in that way, yeah.
And so do you think that the problem is that the youth is growing more troubled, or is it just that, as you said earlier, there's more policing of the schools and therefore more young people are getting arrested?
I do think that there's more policing. There's more criminalization of what I think used to be just thought of as youthful behavior. Things that in the past, if you had done in school, there probably would have been no law enforcement. The principal might have been called. You would have been sent to the office. But certainly the police would not have been involved.
And so what does this have to say about the system, our justice system, that we're putting so many young people behind bars these days?
I mean, unfortunately, I think that the justice system is being used as a last resort and rather, relying on it first rather than last as a way to solve a variety of problems, Being frustrated with youth, I think, is something that has happened generationally, but we're relying on police and the justice system to address those behaviors rather than figuring out another way, whether it's mentoring, whether it's other activities. Instead, the police are called.
And so we are seeing, if we are seeing this crackdown, I mean, how does that benefit our society to crack down and put more and more young people in jail?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. By arresting kids, by putting them in jail, we're disconnecting them from the very institutions that ensure their success. So whether it's education, which leads to a good job, and general, participation in society to ensure good life outcomes, students are being disconnected from those things.
Okay, so in addition to the crackdown, what are some possible social or economic explanations for the rise in arrests? Or is that part of the picture?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, it's interesting. We have in the past thought that a rise in employment might have something to do with an increase in arrest or crime rates, but that's clearly not what's going on. I think it's hard to say what's going on other than the fact that we're sort of intentionally using the justice system more than we really need to. So it could be a lot of things. But we know sort of the policy response could be, let's redirect our funds into positive institutions like jobs and education and even treatment.
Also want to add, because fairly recent statistics show that 1 in 5 kids live in poverty today, and a lot of times a correlation can be drawn between poverty and the type of environment that kids grow up in. Could this be part of the picture?
Well, I feel like we definitely we can't lose by ensuring that there are fewer children living in poverty. And of course, this isn't to say that people that are living in poverty are more likely to commit crime, but it is worth it to make sure that anyone who's living in poverty has access to all of the things that, make sure that they're no longer living in poverty, whether it's food, again, jobs. These things can't hurt.
And so what needs to be done to reverse this, to make it so that these rates aren't so high, to keep our youth out of handcuffs?
First and foremost, I think that we need to just scale back the number of offenses that are arrestable. The Washington Post recently had this whole list of things that you could be arrested for, from fishing without a license to not having expired plates, and those things might not necessarily have to do with younger kids, but all these things that we could be potentially arrested for, we need to just scale it back.
Okay, and lastly, very quickly, just want to ask you, these numbers that have just come out, what does it say about the youth in the U.S. and maybe looking at the bigger picture about our nation?
Well, I think sort of generally, kids they're no different. There's no change in the way kids are behaving. And it's a real danger to start, assuming that this generation is somehow misbehaving worse than the one before. But again, the best way to ensure that the kids, that the students, that any young person is going to have the most positive life outcomes is to ensure that they can stay in school and then eventually get a job with good wages.
Amanda, thank you for weighing in on this. That was Amanda Pederuti, researcher and policy analyst at the Justice Policy Institute.